Record. Hello, friends. I'm Holly Elisa Bruno, and I have the delight of being with Denise Rokicki, who's waving at you, and Priscilla Rodriguez, who's also here. And we three are, among other things, trauma survivors. And we do this program every week for you and for us to share about what it's like to walk each other home, the everyday stuff that comes up and gets in our faces, like we interact with family members, and that can be a challenge. Or we don't interact with family members, and that can be a challenge. Or the more general thing about living in a country. Priscilla has relatives in this country, in Puerto Rico. So that is a different setting, but we all basically are Americans, and we're facing now the fact that we are at war.
Yeah, we are.
And the question I have that we might get to this afternoon is, or whatever time you guys are listening, is what's it like for us when the world around us reminds us of being a trauma survivor, when it's like repeating our history? How do we deal with that? So that might be something we get to. But the first thing we're going to do, my friends, is just let you know that and Denise and Priscilla can remark upon this, because this is a program about recovering from often very
Trauma,
difficult trauma, often very difficult
adversity.
Adversity.
adversity. That is the term that's also used now. The trauma adversity, because we face things that really affected our brains. And that's the hard thing about trauma. I mean, people say, doesn't everybody have trauma? What do you guys think of that? Does everybody have trauma?
I think everybody does have trauma, but I think it is, of different, just like in your ACE scores,
Mm-hmm.
you might have 1 point in towards trauma, or you could have 8 or 10 or 3 or whatever. So I think
Just in
everyone
case
gets
somebody's listening that doesn't know about adverse ACE, could you just explain that to us?
adverse childhood experiences, and it's a questionnaire, and you score yourself, and I think it's 10
Mm-hmm.
points that would have traumatized a child and or an adult also, but potential trauma experiences in childhood, and then that's how you know if you're a trauma survivor.
Right. And there was a long-term study done in California by the Kaiser Foundation, and they studied the longitudinal effects of children, right, that face trauma. And some of the questions they ask are, was there physical violence in your home? Did you witness physical violence? Well, the answer to that question is a absolute yes. Um, Was there mental illness? Did you face someone who is mentally ill in your family? Yes. And so Denise is saying that the top score we can get is a 10. And so in terms of answering the question, does everybody have trauma? That's one way to find out. That's one way to find out. And if you want to take the ACEs test, just go online. Denise, what would you advise them? Or Priscilla, how would they find the adverse childhood experiences?
I
Yeah,
say
okay.
Google adverse childhood events survey or something like that.
Adverse childhood experiences, right? And it would come up, and then you could, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, then you go explore it and take the questions, and you'll know.
Yeah. Priscilla, you've taken that, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. I would recommend anybody that feels if you have where when we talk about ACEs is talking about experiences that one's experience based, and we are scoring it based on one's perceptions. But it's fair to say that many people have not yet gotten the ACE assessment because now they're older. So there's many people walking with trauma unaware. So I guess I want to simplify it to say anything that has cost you or has not landed in you nicely can be trauma effect. I think it's good to mention community violence, losses, even if your dog passed away, could be considered trauma. The
Right.
experiences we're now hearing with racism, war, anything that makes you
Or
that triggers any type of feelings can be considered trauma, which is why I'm starting to use the word adverse experiences instead of trauma to help people understand that trauma can be seen in so many ways. And there's no particular thing. Even if you get pinched in the thumb,
right.
can be considered a
Right. A
trauma
lot of
attack.
people do. Right. A lot of people do think of trauma, the term trauma, as indicating physical, something
Hmm.
physical.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to take the different stand here, and that's okay. I like when we do. Trauma to me comes in two forms. One is a one-time event, like witnessing a parent die. That's a one-time event, but boy, that affects the brain. Or, being around 911 or being around some experience that is so upsetting that the brain goes into its locked up system. So it could be one experience or it could be
Protective. Really, it's trying to protect you,
right.
your brain. Right. That's where it goes.
It tries to protect us, but it shuts us down in many ways. And then the next time a similar threat comes up, we can shut down. And that becomes a lifelong pattern of shutting down. The other type of trauma is the repetitive pattern of abuse or neglect. So if a child comes home every day and there's no one there, and the child learns I'm abandoned. Nobody's here for me. And that happens over and over again. So those are two sources of trauma. But here's the difference where I see trauma and adversity being very different. We all face adversity. Those are challenges in our life. Trauma is when the brain is affected severely enough that the brain changes how it responds in the future. When a threat comes, for example, when I was beaten with a belt that had a buckle. The first time that happened, I was really little, so I don't remember the first time it happened, but ever after that, I was so traumatized. That is, my brain was so set on knowing this is going to hurt. This is going to frighten me. This is going to make me want to run or because I knew I couldn't fight back. These people were all bigger. My brain said to me whenever I heard my father opening the cellar door, and coming up with a belt. My brain went into a state of panic, of severe fear. And that's what I consider trauma to be. Look, I broke my arm. That didn't traumatize me. I fell down. That didn't traumatize me. Those were adversities that any child faces. But I don't want to say that everybody has trauma, because here's the other part of trauma. If a child had trauma and no support and no help, then the trauma became the child's own to have to handle. And that's part of my syndrome as an adult child, is that I feel like my first response is, you got to take care of this yourself. There's nobody going to be there for you. What happens with some children is they are raised with support systems where they can say, Mama, my best friend got hurt at school and I'm really scared. And the mama gonna do all kinds of things. Oh, honey, come here.
Right. Should we
Talk.
call your friend? What should we do? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you just
Boredom.
want to
Right.
support him? And, Denise, you did so many of these things when you were a preschool teacher. When I came home, I had to take care of my mentally ill mother. I couldn't count on her. So what I feel that makes a difference between, for me, adversity and trauma is that everybody faces challenges in their lives. How do we get through them? Well, if we get through them with our brain, as I did with my brain being impacted and affected for life, and there was no one there to help me to learn how to moderate, what is the term people use? To regulate myself.
Regulate, right.
There was no regulation. I didn't see it in anybody. Those are trauma to me. Adversity is more facing a challenge.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that
sorry.
has an impact
I
on me.
Yeah, and I agree. I just like to use the word adversity to make sure that I'm also bringing the cultural and validating experiences overall. But you're right. Like, I think so for me, like trauma is those big events. That when you're speaking about them, they say, yes, we experienced this effect that cost us, and this was a true violation to our feelings, and this is why they're still elevating. Then I like to use the word adversity to validate any experience that can still be triggering, that people have not had the nurturing or support or the hand holding to overcome, which we see it a lot in early childhood experiences, and this is where the ACEs test comes. And also we do also the DE is the development assessment for children, and it helps us see a little bit of the environment and things that are impacting the children, which I love it because it allows me to provide some psychoeducation to the caregiver. But unless we make it, like if we say traumatic experiences, or like this can be, this behavior or this structure doesn't change, your child may suffer from insecurity or may suffer, be a victim of bullying and all this, is because a lot of the things happen at home a lot of times.
I hear you. What I hear you especially on is and we haven't talked about this much, but Dr. Judith Herman, who's still in Cambridge, Massachusetts, wrote a book called Trauma and Recovery, and her book was about not just family trauma. It was about cultural trauma. It was about what we're going through right now. The country is in a war. When a country's in a war, or when there are secret police on the street, or when somebody of brown skin or speaks a different language is just automatically picked up, that is a kind of trauma that for me, for me, it just triggers all the lack of safety again. And I have to
Right. Being a woman in a patriarchal culture that is in every media form that we are exposed to, telling us how we're to be a lady, that's trauma.
and
And a
hearing about the
lady,
survivors. You're
right,
right, girl.
a
Go ahead.
lady being someone who complies with the expectations of a patriarchal culture, you know, and it's traumatic being a woman in this culture, especially nowadays when locker room talk is happening at the next table in the restaurant you're eating in. A friend of mine just posted, she wrote a book with another friend of mine about sexual harassment in the workplace.
Good for her.
It was like,
Okay.
yeah, it's like 2 years old now. She
Okay.
just wrote up, recently wrote a post on Facebook that she was sitting, in a restaurant. She's in people, in Toledo or
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
So, they're at where in people go. I don't know, not my type of restaurants, but anyway, she's sitting there in the booth next to her is three men and one of our local politicians, and definitely close enough to hear conversations from booth to booth. And she did qualify at the beginning that, eavesdropping is always not really cool, but she was anyway.
Okay, so
And
she could hear these guys talking,
right,
right?
three guys and a official, a local official, city council member, mayor. I don't know who it was, but
Okay, were they all four of them men?
yep.
Okay.
And you know, they were talking about, oh, she was bending his ear too much or something, or discussing a woman a new woman in the office or something. And what the other guy says, "Well, she should have bent something else." You know, right out in public, and everybody's laughing, you know. So she reported that because she wanted everybody to know who it was. You know, you could figure out who it was by the way that she described, but
So
it's
how
still
is that?
happening. Locker room
What
talk is still happening. Men still look at women that way and talk about women that way behind their back or whatever. And
don't we hear that all the time with the cabinet of the president?
yeah, it's
Don't we
traumatic to live in
don't we
this.
hear it all the time with the Epstein files?
Yeah, there's a lot. It's overwhelming sometimes, but I think, we do have to keep hearing it, and, more people have to believe it. And I believe that so many people are really mad about it, and powerful men are mad about it too, and they know
Mhm.
how to get in there and do the reporting. And I believe it's coming out. I think it's slow, steady progress in a feeling of
I
cultural. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's not just I'm worried. It feels weird to be a Latina in this times. It feels weird to try to go from low class to middle class, to think that one day I will make it higher than middle class. With the way we're going, it feels weird to feel validated, and honestly, it feels very tiring. I feel like we have gone so far fighting for equity and inclusion, and like I posted not so long ago, I don't pay tax money for war. I pay tax money for equity. I pay for inclusion. I pay for women's right, and we're
Crosswalks,
being
road repairs.
yeah,
Education.
yeah, and where our rights are being violated left and right. Honestly, like I take two everyday prescriptions, and now I've been without prescription. Actually, we just called and say, how much is this one going to cost? Because I need an insurance authorization, an insurance I pay for. Like, make it make sense to me, right? But then here we are starting more trouble when our house. One of the things that I always learn, and it was one of the things as a Christian, it says you can't go out and preach to other households when your house it's
In order.
dysregulated, it's not in order. And I remember my mom also telling me, if your house is like this or like that, nothing good is going to come in, because you're accumulating all these things, and order was always a thing. um and now I understand. Now I'm 43, and I'm starting to understand the weight that this information has. And even as a mother who advocates for inclusion, even as a mother who talks about trauma and understanding and mindfulness and sit with parents, it's very hard. Like, adolescence is very hard, especially working with parents, because it is a moment where parents are feeling very authoritarian, and like, why did they stop listening to me? And we need to validate that they're developing their own persona.
Oops, she just got
And
frozen,
here I
sweetie.
feel like we don't have our own persona no more. Oh, sorry. I feel like we're living in a place where we don't have our own persona no more, where that doesn't even exist, where we're just trying to make it to the next stage and see
Priscilla,
what
I hear
happens.
because I'm paying attention to the fact that it was only a few weeks ago that the three of us talked about this major experience, which was to say that a man from Puerto Rico appeared on national television, Bad Bunny, appeared on national television, and he took a remarkable stand of honoring his culture. He climbed up on a telephone pole, and he wasn't just doing that to climb up. He was doing that because that your country has been deprived of a really good grid, and it needs that. And that was just one example. And the other things he talked about were the really good things about the culture, like, that the lady from New York with the wonderful rings, and the social club, So what I'm trying to say here is, he, just like we're doing right now, just like Denise was doing when she said, look, this is always with us. What Bad Bunny did was a healing thing for the country, for the Puerto Ricans in the country, and for the rest of us that are not Puerto Rican. I think that a lot of people didn't even know Puerto Rico was American. I think a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
people don't even know that. And so what I'm saying is, he lifted us up. I think he lifted us up, and he was really powerful. And the president of the United States at the same time was countering him and was attacking him. And there is trauma for me. What that means about trauma is that all of the repetitive put downs that you had for being from Puerto Rico, for speaking not English as your first language, that is continuous. And the number of people that were complaining, how can he do the Super Bowl not in English? Well, guess what? He did. He
We're
did.
being bullied. Middle class and minority are being bullied.
Right. It's a big bully thing. And we're now bullied. The Congress is bullied into giving up its power to declare war. We've got this madman who says, I'll just kill people who are out in boats in the Caribbean because I feel like it. I'll call them drug people. That is disgusting. So he's now being sued because those are murders that are going on with these people. And then
I'll go take out a leader.
just kill him.
Take him
Just
out.
kill him.
Bomb it.
Right.
Bomb the whole block.
And don't think of the children. I mean,
A girl school was bombed.
the girls' school was bombed, and how many children are now going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives because they had bombs going on and off around them. And then there are the figurative, or the bombs that are really, they don't look like bombs to other people, but they're bombs to us. In other words, Priscilla, you go out in the street, someone hears you if you're speaking Spanish with somebody. You don't know if that person's going to report you. I don't, and my son is Korean. He's got skin color that's not like mine. And he, thank God, is known to the police in his community because he's neurodiverse and he acts different sometimes. And he is different. And someone could say, well, let's get him. He looks brown. Well, yeah, let's get him. And they
Right.
would pick him up and they would trigger so much in him, being neurodiverse, it would be so terrifying to him. So I feel like, well, I want to thank you both for raising the fact that trauma is a cultural issue. It's a gender issue. It's a class issue. I mean, I think all three of us have faced trauma because our parents, or I don't know, Denise, maybe your parents were different because they had businesses and stuff, but my both of my parents, my immigrant grandparents and my other grandparents, they were dirt poor. They were dirt poor. And they were so traumatized by that they passed on to me the trauma of being afraid of never having enough money. And one of the traits of trauma survivors is we're afraid that we will never have financial security.
Right. And I was raised where we didn't have nothing, but whatever we had, we'd share. So when we would go out without, we would know it was also hard to ask because the pride.
Right.
And like you said, Holly, that was also has been passed down because now I'm now in the space where these were the things that were not taught to me, and this is why I continue to face these barriers as some things in my life. And making sure and even explaining to my children, everything in life is a learning experience. You have to look at it from a place of learning and not as a place of failure.
Word
Because if now we're going
punishment
to continue, or
Or
punishment,
punishment.
right? And
punishment is
just
another.
and appreciating the experience to be able to know and the opportunity that we still have ahead of us. And I think that those are the type of metaphor I try to stand on when we feel the world is coming. Because when you're trying to, right now, I find myself making a big leap of faith in my. I feel like I've been doing a big leap of faith for the last couple of months, but I can
Yes.
still see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I see possibility because I don't think when I look back, I see everything that I have evolved and I continue to learn. That is the only way I could think about its opportunity, and if and at least the what I'm modeling to them and helping them understand. And I could see how not just my children but other people slightly think like, wow, I didn't thought about it that way. I didn't thought about. And I let them know when you're breaking chains, it's not that easy as snapping a chain. No, you have to get a sword just and put some energy there before you cut it. You got to put
Grind
some
it, grind it.
strength. Sometimes you got to put fire to, it's a lot. So don't think that anything in life is as easy as it sounds because
I
we're
love the
breaking.
point that you're making about helping children see, and Denise, you nailed it too, helping children see that the measure of life isn't do I succeed or do I fail? The measure of life is how well do I live my life? How well do I grow? How much do I learn? How much do I not beat myself up? And so many of us were raised in religious, can be religious abuse too. I was raised in such a tight evangelical Christian background that it was either or. And I was, that was traumatizing. I was going to hell. There was no question. That's scary for a kid that you're either chosen or you're not. And so that threat was there all the time too. What Denise is saying also is if we're raised with the fear of punishment, then that threat can traumatize us. I certainly was like talking about my father coming up from the basement that was never paved over when I was a kid. It was all a dirt basement. That's the way he knew to do things. He built the house, left the dirt basement, had his belt with the metal part of it hanging there. And when he'd open the cellar door, the minute I'd hear that sound, the minute he'd take that off, the belt off, I was traumatized because I was afraid of punishment. I was terrified of the punishment. And I remember it didn't even have to be immediate. When I would stand up for something, as I did often as a high school student, I would get called into the principal's office. Well, the vice principal, he was the one that enforced all the laws and punished people. And he'd call me in to make an example. You know that phrase, making an example out of somebody? So he'd call me in and he'd announce my name over there used to be these public speaker systems in high schools, like, so Holly Elisa Bruno, would you come to the principal's office? Anyway, I would defend what I was doing and why. And he would say to me, the vice principal would say to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you were right or wrong. I've already called your father. And then he would sneer at me, and he knew that that would trigger a trauma response right then and there, because I knew I was no longer safe to go home. I wasn't safe to go home anyway. Well, my father would punish me if anybody from the school called and said, I had to talk to your daughter today. He would punish me. So it's the threat of punishment. It's also the threat of being reminded that we're different. It's the threat of being reminded that we might live in poverty. It used to be a syndrome called the bag lady syndrome. And a lot of rich and famous people had it. They feared that no matter how much money they made, they would never have enough money. They'd be out on the streets. And
Never get to plenty.
never get to plenty. And that the fear as a trauma survivor is that we are never going to have enough and we're never going to be enough. Does that make
And you're
sense?
touching, yes, you're saying a very good point, because one of the things that people talk is the correlation between the shame that we carry sometimes and
Yes.
the feelings that come from shame. When we are
Yes.
embarrassed, when we are in when we are in when we are embarrassed, we are in fear of being spoken about, or not doing it right enough or good enough, and all these stuff. And then there is a connection between shame and fear, and talking about, is it shame or is it trauma? Because sometimes we get anxiety and we will say, this is because I've experienced trauma. And in reality, here we go to what Holly was trying to explain. It's been adversity that we have experienced, because we never have we have never were validated in that. And it's not trauma, it's not being validated that caused us these anxiety feelings, which in a way are shameful. Um, and I think it's very good to talk about those things too, and the difference, because as women, it could be shame, it could be embarrassment, it could be the worry of us not fitting, it could be culturally designed, and are we not culturally designed, or we're not enough for these. In the Latino culture, we women tend to be submissive, um and the man says what he needs to do, which has been a very interesting in these last decades, because some men still want to have power, but yes, us women, we have to work, because now the um the finances is no longer, men are not able to afford taking care of a woman alone, so women now have to take care of the finances, but also expected to do the house chores like they used to do in the 1960s. So yeah.
Right. It was different for a while when when it was more agricultural, like when some people were bringing in the food and creating when there were roles where putting away the food, like cooking the food, is providing for the family that way, that was equal in many ways to going out there and planting the crops. We lost you, Priscilla, but I hope you'll come back. But that changed. And so it was expected that both the woman and the man,
Right. Contribute to the household.
right, and they were both doing something valuable. And then, and then when women's work became mechanized, just kind of like what's going on right now with AI, when women's work became mechanized, then it was like, there's no value to this. There's no monetary value. So I'm but just keeping her. She's,
Right.
And you've probably seen the studies where they monetize what it would cost to hire
Right.
somebody to do what women do. We've had that data for years, but it hasn't changed people. Women in America are still paid less. And that's traumatizing. I mean, it's adversity. Here's a difference for me of adversity and trauma. Adversity would be when I'm offered less money for a job because I'm a woman. And then I go in and I've got all my arguments ready and I've got the case law ready and I've got all that ready. That's adversity, but I'm not yet traumatized by it. When I'm traumatized by it is when I feel there's no hope. When I feel I can't do a damn thing about this. And that is what is really scary. Priscilla, we hope you get to come back on. That's really scary. I think it's when our brains not only expect the worst, but they prepare for the worst. And it's like we're always hyper vigilant on who's going to hurt me next, who's going to come after me next. There's no way to live.
Right.
And yet little
And
kids
that's when
could
I noticed that's what I noticed with my sister this weekend, that,
Yeah.
she really spends a lot of time as a trauma survivor, and she has not put any effort into healing her trauma.
Mhm.
So she really talks about all the negative, things, everything negative, the trash got stolen off the street. Yeah, I mean, just I don't know, it's hard to
Well, I
recreate
hear you. It's
it
a negative. Everything is the not good.
against her, right? And that's what she remembers, that's what she recounts, that's what she says over and over again, and that is what she is creating for her future.
What do you think she's doing to her brain every time she recalls that negative stuff?
It, I, she's validating, incorrect beliefs about the world around her, that the world's against her, that, there is no goodness.
Probably promulgating or continuing depression.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's depressed. And, well, I mean, sometimes she's manic too. I don't know. She has different
Hmm.
situations, but this weekend I noticed that I was not so reactive to the negativity that she perpetuates through her discourse.
So now we're talking about a subject that comes right out of this living with trauma every day. And that's the fact that, and we've only got about 15, 20 minutes left, but I think it's important that when we interact with family again, and that can remind us either to be resilient and deal with it, or it can take us right back to what traumatized us to begin with and put us in that hopeless state and put us in
Right.
that hypervigilant state. And I think part of being traumatized is hypervigilance. I'm never safe. I'm never safe. I can't ever feel safe on the street. I can't ever feel safe if there's a big man around. I can't. So you decided, Denise, to visit a member of your family who's not facing the fact that she's a trauma survivor. She's blaming other people, but you made a decision to go visit her and you made some decisions about how you were going to be. Tell us about making that decision because it would be easier not to see her.
Right. And it was, and, she was not, I was blocked from her Facebook and her telephone for, well over a year. And
Mm.
I was happy about it. I mean,
Because
I
it freed
didn't,
you from what?
it freed me from, what I feel an obligation to her. She's like 14 or 16 months younger than I. And, she came out traumatized. She, was holding her breath and passing out at a very young age. She was a miserable baby, crying all the time. And, she came out that way. And then, the life, showed her much of the same.
How old was she when your father died?
She was like 3 when our
And you were
father,
like 4.
yeah, I was like 4. She was probably 2.5, and I
Okay.
was
So
4.
both of you faced this traumatizing event, loss of a parent. That's one of the ACEs
Right.
studies factors. Did you lose somebody close to you? You both faced that, and you were so young. What does a 4-year-old child know? What does a 2.5-year-old child know? And now we're back to the mitigation of trauma. If there's somebody that loves the child, like Priscilla, you do so many things with your kids to help them be with life on life's terms. Life is going to give us challenges. And here's how, and what you said about your family growing up, you didn't have a lot, but you shared whatever you had. And there was beauty in that you could help each other out. There was also sorrow in that because you couldn't ask for help. You couldn't show that you had this. In my case,
Dire.
Or like right now, and we carry
yeah.
the residue. Even when you get help, even when you try to cut the chain and plant them, you still have to face the residue, because one of the hardest things that has been for me, and even teach my culture and people that are like me, is the power of boundary, and how not to feel bad for creating boundaries and what boundaries look like, because I believe that people should have boundaries. And when you have boundaries, you're putting yourself into healthy beginnings and a healthy journey.
How many of us in this threesome were raised with boundaries? My
Exactly.
boundaries were invaded every second of the day. My
Right.
physical boundaries, my spiritual boundary, everything.
Right. And, after my trauma of losing my father and my sisters, we did not have nurturing support. My mom had a nervous breakdown. She sent
Yeah.
Debbie and I to Alabama to a grandmother who didn't really like children, especially girls.
She didn't want you there.
No. And, where I ended up sleeping in the bathtub so I didn't pee the bed.
How shaming and punishing that must have been. Oh, God.
So, yeah.
So what Priscilla is saying is that, we as adults, we get it, how important boundaries are. I've worked with my neurodiverse son for 42 years on boundaries, and it doesn't come naturally. Really has to be continuously reinforced. And I have to continuously reinforce my own boundaries. Boundaries are one of the ways in which we trauma survivors make a good life. And if we're constantly with people that don't have boundaries, that can batter us down. Like, so Denise and Priscilla, you both are like now really connected with your sisters. Denise, you went to be with her, you went to her domain. How did you carry, what boundaries could you not take with you, and what boundaries could you take with you? Because you
Well,
really entered a different force field.
yeah, I did. Well, I just decided beforehand. She chain smokes inside her house. And so I just decided on my way there I was going to smoke. I quit smoking around Thanksgiving time and have, been very successful with not smoking. But I just decided that I was going to smoke there. So I did smoke two
Did
packs
you
of
did you
cigarettes.
worry that that might put you back into the addiction?
No, I said in my mind, the way that I quit was hypnosis. And so I just made up my mind that I was going to smoke while I was there, and when I left, I wasn't going to smoke anymore. And I've been, this is 24 hours later, so I haven't smoked.
Did you have the desire to smoke?
No, I don't feel like smoking. I didn't, no, not having nicotine urges.
And
I
you got
never
clean
really
hair, clean
believed
clothes, and
right, I had to clean all my clothes and my bags and everything that I took in there because it was really stinky. And that was part of my hypnosis, was to highlight the parts that I didn't like, and stinkiness and stinky clothes was one of those things. So, yeah,
so how did you, so you, that was like one of the ways you loosened your boundaries so you could be with your sister. But at the same time, how was it emotionally? Because your sister with her negativity, which is depression, maybe.
right, right. I
How
was
did you,
kind of playing on that depression, because I was like, a little bit disappointed that I was sitting there smoking with her, and that, yeah, I was disappointed. I had self, shame about it, smoking,
Hmm.
and so I was in her vibe.
So you joined her, and yet how did you, how, when she was complaining about the world, as you said, the world being against her, did you join her in saying, yeah, that must be awful, or saying, yeah, this happened to me? Or did you counter that? Because there's
Either. I just kind of look at her empty,
mm,
like I, like I'm not empathizing with this. I'm not receiving it into my, I can hear it, but I'm not receiving it in a way. Like I
And
had a boundary. I'm
she
sure
couldn't
she
pick up
could.
from your eyes. Could she pick up like, what you just did
She
with your
probably
eyes? I could pick up the fact that you were not wanting to be present.
right. And I
And
think
people
she
say,
does. I think she does notice that I, don't want to hear, that I'm not receptive to hearing because she will lie from one sentence to the next sentence. Once she doesn't sleep, the next time she slept all day. I mean, it's just such obvious lies that I can't, I can't. My president's lying too much to me all the time. I just don't have there's no way to be trustful of the words. So I was not receptive. I mean, and she doesn't really ask me about myself that
right, that's
much. Right. So,
one of the dynamics is you don't ask somebody.
right.
And it's seen as a virtue, unless the person volunteers information about herself, then you don't ever show any interest in the person. Do you have
Right.
that in your family, Priscilla? Whereas there's an
Oh yeah,
unwritten,
I especially, in the Latino culture, we people just love to know about other people's business. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. So it's funny because even my husband, he will come home and tell me, and I noticed, I don't know if it was just me, a therapy thing, but it's like he'll come home to try to tell me stuff, and I'm like, um, and he's like, you're not listening to me, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I don't care. I don't
Right.
care.
I
It's
don't
just,
care about the office
yeah, like,
politics or my sister's, you know, self-undoing out in the world. It's
what's
not
the poison?
yeah.
interesting.
What's the poison in that when we get involved in other people's business?
We're being judgmental for one thing, and
That's poisoning. Mhm.
right, when we judge others, we're judging ourselves as well. I mean, it's like a comparison. So
So for
Or
me, it's always
mhm.
it. I think that for a long time, and part of why I moved to Massachusetts, because I wanted to kind of like not. I always look at people not judgmental. Like I try not to be non-judgmental, but it's also I feel like it tinkles you in a space where you either are judgmental or you're not. And then if you're not, now this is, and for me it's been like this is where, oh, you just say that because you're a therapist, or you just say that because you study psychology. And honestly, I'm just saying this because I don't care, and everybody has their own life, and then this is why I don't want to talk about it, because I'm not going to sit here and justify your nonsense and why you're telling me this person should have done X, Y, and Z. And like how do we come maintain this communication with nice, like I'm like, well, so and then I'll try to switch the conversation with my
right.
husband. Sometimes he'll be like, you obviously not listening. And I'm like, well, it's not that I'm not listening, it's just honestly I don't know what you want me to tell you about the dog dying and this, that, and this and the other. Like, I don't know.
This is powerful stuff, my friends, because there are taboos that don't get talked about. But one of the taboos and one of the requirements, a taboo is, well, no, let me go start back in another way about that. When I talk about somebody else, which I don't bother too much anymore, because it poisons me as well as poisoning the atmosphere. Poisons why? Because you're right, Denise, I'm taking somebody else's inventory. And then you're also right. If I stop identifying with other people and accepting them as they are, and I start judging them, that judging poisons me. There's something else too, which is I'm responsible for myself and I can change myself with help, right? And if I start talking about other people and how they need to change, then all of a sudden I'm off in that world of codependency where everybody's game to talk about everybody. My parents modeled that. I remember when we were grown up, even And I had a place in Maine on a lake, not a big place, it was a beautiful little 1930s cottage, but I used to invite the family. And they would rent either a cottage nearby or they'd stay in my cottage. And the closeness led to real toxicity. Here's an example. One of my sisters was living with her husband, but they were not in the same bed. They were not in the same room. Found that out because the kids told me about that. But my parents would observe my parents would observe my sister. She's a psychiatrist, the sister. They would observe her with her children and they would immediately criticize. For example, my sister would, if one of her daughters wanted eggs for breakfast and the other wanted pancakes, my sister would make pancakes and eggs. Now that's a parental choice. There are consequences. It's a parental choice. But my parents would go along to everybody else and say, "Isn't that disgusting? She knows better than that. What's wrong with her? Those kids are going to grow up so spoiled, so selfish." And they acted entitled, like they could do that. And the whole atmosphere got poisoned because if I countered them, then I was being disrespectful to the elders because they had a right to make those judgments. If I didn't counter them, I felt bad about myself because I was going along with the negativity about somebody. So this requirement to be in everybody's business, it's toxic. And yet in my family, it was an expectation. They could also talk about the neighbors. It wasn't just people in the family.
Yeah, perfect example. When the girls become a señorita. That's a moment that people don't talk about. But girls don't like to tell the world that they just got their period.
Right.
And in the Latino culture, this is something that the dog knows it, the neighbor knows it, the auntie knows it. It's just like, and then they calling each other. I never
The
forget.
red rice party. Don't they have a red rice party? When a girl starts her period.
What's the red rice party?
I'm not sure what Ian's heritage is, but whenever her granddaughters started their period, all the women would get together and we'd have a red rice party and eat red rice. I don't know why.
That's not a bad initiation, right? There were women who would smack their daughters when that daughter got her.
It was kind of like a rite of passage. It was trying sort of to be like a special honor. Now you're a woman. Now you can hang with the women.
You're in the red tent. Yeah, there's even a book called The Red Tent about how the only time women in this Middle Eastern country could get together and not be under men's influence was when they had their period because men didn't want to be around them. So the red tent was the bleeding tent and they could go there. But I think this is another really good point about culture and trauma. There are things that it was okay to harm your children.
Right.
I was in Turkey and I was wandering around. I sometimes don't know about being safe. Anyway, I was wandering around by myself in the streets of Turkey and I saw all these shops and I wanted to go in them. And many of the shops had little models of preteen boys. And they had crowns on and they had these bejeweled outfits on and they were all, I thought, what is this? I mean, what's in the culture? I found out in that culture, a male child is not circumcised at birth. They wait until the child is 11, 12, 13 years old. And then they have a ritual all together for all the boys that have turned that age. And it is a ritual of what the Jewish people call having a moil. You have a moil and then they do the circumcision. But at age 13, ouch. And what they do is they give the boys
maybe no anesthesia.
Well, they don't have it. So what they do is they give them stuff to drink or druggy stuff. So they're not aware of what's going on, but it's a male initiation, right? That is accepted trauma. It's accepted trauma. And so that, then those boys raise their sons to be the same way. Don't we in our own cultures have ways as women that we were raised that are destructive and can be traumatizing?
Right. Act like a lady. That's what I
Don't
like.
give your kids no explanation. One of the
Mm.
biggest thing that I learned in my life, and I was raising I was a young mother, and I remember telling my kids, "Don't worry, it's only gonna be temporary." And hearing adults in my life telling me, "You don't give them no explanation." But I've always
Mm.
felt like, because, and I don't regret giving my kids explanation, and I talk about this all the time, because when you give explanation, you let them know that you validate them, you see them, you know it's uncomfortable, they don't want to leave mommy, but it is what it is, and you're teaching them that
Mhm.
even on discomfort, no matter what. And I have a good relationship with all my kids, and part of it, I believe, was because I always built that trust and communication. I remember I would give them consequences, and it was their choice to pick their consequences. So, in a nice table conversation, we would decide what those consequences will be on the gray days. So on the gray days, they already knew the consequences because they chose it when we were in the table. But
And
they
how
were
did
able
that
to hold
remove,
themselves
sweetie, and
accountable.
that's great practice. How did that remove traumatizing them? How did that counter trauma?
Because it
It
wasn't
helped them
power
understand.
over.
Exactly. And they knew they
They
had a
had a
voice. And
choice.
to this day,
Yes.
not so long ago, my daughter and I had a little discomforting moment. And she said, "You a therapist and you don't practice what you preach." And I said, "You're so right. A therapist will tell Priscilla, you giving her too much leeway, Priscilla. Don't do this to yourself, Priscilla. Priscilla, be kind to. Actually, you know what a therapist will be telling you? Thanks to your mom, you can advocate like that." I love these moments like this, because even in those times, I'm able to tell her, "I hear you, and these are your consequences, your
And we can
choices."
face this with humor.
And we face it
I,
with
I,
humor. They face it with humor, and we get through it.
that's beautiful because being traumatized, another factor is being totally out of control.
Right.
Traumatization as opposed to adversity is I don't have any control. When my father came into my bedroom at night, the only control I had available to me was to dissociate, leave my body behind. And that was a sick kind of control, but it's the only thing I had. If a child has a choice, that means that you're respecting the child and the child's ability to process things. Is beautiful what you did. And yet, yes, you would have been shamed for that because you were not being the traditional hierarchy, which is demonstrating to children parents have complete control
Right.
over the kids. And what kind of message?
Interesting.
Yeah, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
interesting. Life proved a point, because out of the cousins, my kids all graduated from high school. Not, my kids still home. I only have one grandkid. Like, my kids proven that for me, that was good. And
Mhm.
my older kids, their dads are wearing and are not involved in their life. And one of the things that I always acknowledge is, and I can see also now the difference between adversity and trauma is, even through adversity, we could still thrive, right?
Yes.
Even through trauma, we can also thrive. But with my
Mhm.
children, I was able to tell them, even with these people not in your life, that doesn't determine who you will be. And one of the things, I have one of my daughters who really have a lot of pain, because of the abandonment, and it is a healing process. But one of the things that I want her at one point, and hopefully she is like, even with that pain, the best thing you can always show people is that pain did not define who you are and who you could be to them, because you can still love at a distance. Just don't hold it.
That's crucial because a lot of the learning I'm still doing in my life is that the pain is not me. The pain is a result. It's a consequence of things that were done to me. But the pain is not me. So when I feel a mood coming over me, like a trauma survivor does, like, oh my God, we bombed another cut. Oh my God. I could go down that victim path, like I'll never have any power here. Or I can say, I'm already going through training this week on how to be what do they call it? A peacemaker at marches.
Peacekeeper.
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 They're going to bring me one of those yellow jackets so I can be a peacekeeper.
Right.
And I'm going through training about that. I already went through clown training so I can keep people having a sense of humor about stuff. And I went through training about how to be able to keep using your phone without having the secret police take it away. So, you know, I have choices. The horrible thing about being a trauma survivor is we don't feel we have choices. Somebody else is taking over. So guys, we're at the end here. We need to
Yes.
wrap, but I just want to ask each one of you, we've covered some powerful things here. What is your takeaway or what touches you most about what we talked about?
For me, it's that, by us meeting here each week, we are, supporting each other and learning and growing together. And it's a huge value.
Yeah. I think, and I'm grateful we had the opportunity to speak about the difference between adversity and trauma and know the difference. In knowing how they can both look similar, but then they can also be very different, and how to protect ourselves from experiences or protect our loved ones.
And I agree with I support both of you in what you're saying. And what I feel is I, as a trauma survivor, need to tell the truth about the reality I'm living in. And it's bizarre, crazy, sick, and wrong that we are bombing another country. I say we, it's one person that's bombing another country, that we're killing fishermen in the sea. This is wrong. I think a law just passed that says if you're a woman and you changed your name, you're not going to be able to vote.
Right.
You're going to have to get all this extra
Papers.
proof. And how many women are going to know that? So what I'm trying to say here is when I'm in an environment that is full of trauma, one of the ways I can stay sane is to do exactly what we're doing. Talk with other people. Hear what other people are going through. How are you dealing with this? Like last week, Priscilla, you said something that was very powerful. You said, I put on weight. Well, that helps because that is a natural response to protect ourselves. Why do women put on weight? One of the theories, as you know, is the bigger we get, the less appealing we're going to be to other people. So they're not going to be hitting on us.
Not going to bug us.
They're not going to bug us as much. We know how to do that. Or I, as an older woman, can be invisible now. And I do things so I'm not invisible because when I'm invisible, it reminds me of nobody sees me, nobody hears me. So
I've noticed that too at my age a couple
have
times
you?
now that, oh, they don't even see me. They don't even look at me like especially young boys. They will not even because I work at the pantry,
Food bank. Yeah.
right? And people volunteer all the time. Young boys and young women, like college age, they will completely ignore me. It's
And
so
there's that's in
interesting.
Not
sweet.
me, but young boys want me. I'm like, whoa, you could be my kid, boy.
Right.
Well, girl, you're
But that's me.
attracted. I mean, we're
I'm
all
sure it's
Which
attracted
is
to
worse,
smart.
right? I'm glad
huh?
they're not hitting on me, but I guess it could
Oh my
But
God.
not yet. I'm gonna get there. Just that I think that in their 40s, women have look more mature and
right,
all this, and they still have the body. Some of us have the body of a
Yep.
teenage.
Yep.
We may have the nice cars, and that's what they attracted to. They
right,
don't. They don't have the maturity to deal with a woman like 40.
right.
Well, some women, the things you see.
So beautiful. There are traumatizing possibilities anywhere. And as long as I
Everywhere.
can stay, and what can we do? This is walking each other home. If I can stay in my true self and I can be true to who I am, then I can say, okay, I'll just walk through this crowd and nobody saw me, but I see me.
Yeah.
Right.
Or but you see, I've had this my whole life as a woman in a male environment. I would come up with an idea and it would fall on deaf ears. And then a man would say it and they'd say, oh, George, that's beautiful. That's great. Yeah, guys, what I think I want to conclude with is we're in a traumatizing time, and it's particularly traumatizing if you are an ethnic person, if you're brown or black or yellow, if you're a woman. Those are the target groups. Those are the target groups, and we are targeted every day. And what we're being told is, and here's the tough thing. The psychology of insiders and outsiders says, if I'm the insider, I can annihilate the outsider. You don't exist. You do not exist. That's how the Nazis were able to do all of that treacherous stuff. That's how those two people in Minneapolis got killed. If you're not a person, then you can just be killed. And the
Yep.
message we all got was, you guys are not people. You're not the white male hierarchy, the oligarchy. You're not the millionaire people that are running this country. You don't have any choice. And so what do? We talk it through and we act on it and we get out there and protest. Thank God that makes a difference. So we need to wrap. What would you guys like to say to our listeners before we sign off?
Y'all come back now, you hear?
I
I
love
will.
it. I see you next Monday.
And I want to say thank you. It's not easy. It's so much easier in life to just go out and buy a drink or go out and buy a chocolate bar than it is to sit here and say, well, that's no fun. Geez, some crow. Or I used to feel that, oh my God. So I want to say part of being a trauma survivor is learning courage, or maybe even diving deep to the courage that we came to the earth with and reclaiming it. Because I think each one of you and we've got courage, and people listening wouldn't be here if you didn't have hope. That courage would make a difference. So let's sign off on that. Hooray for courage to choose, to live your life. Often, originally, because there's no role model. Priscilla, no role model for what you were doing. Janice, no role model for what you were doing. Holly, Elisa, no role model. So when we create stuff, we get to learn every day, just like what Priscilla said to her kids. So guys, thank you so much. See you next week. And if you're picking this up later, you can always reach out to us. Just look up any one of us with our names right there, and you can discover us. All right, my friends, I'm going to stop the recording and
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Energy.